Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity for Western Academy for the Advanced Research Committee, and heartfelt thanks to Professor Barua for incredible support guidance throughout the past 3.5 years. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional land of Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, sorry about my pronunciation, Lunapeg and Shannon Nation. These lands are connected to the London Township and Sombo treaties of 1796 and the Danish with one spoon convent eponym. I share this acknowledgement as an act of recognition and respect, and as a reminder of our responsibility to learn from and stand in solidarity with the Indigenous community, past and present. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about my PhD research, which focus on women-headed household in post-war Sri Lanka, particularly the challenges they face and the opportunity they create. My interest in this topic began well before PhD. I worked with women-headed household in Sri Lanka for over 7 years. During that time, I realized a major gap in how women-headed households were understood in both policies and development practices. There was no clear definition of who these women were. Most were simply categorized as war widows or vulnerable dependents and placed into single policy box. But what I saw on the ground was very different. That experience inspired me to dig deeper, to understand the lived realities of these women beyond labels, and to explore how identity, policy, and power intersect in shaping their lives. I was born in Sri Lanka, and I was grown up in Sri Lanka. It's a country of stunning landscape, rich culture diversity, and deep historical roots. But like many other post-colonial nations, Sri Lanka also carries the weight of painful past. From 1983 to 2009, Sri Lanka went through a brutal civil war between the government of Sri Lanka and the Liberation Tigers of Tamil, which is called LTT, a separatist group seeking an independent Tamil state in north and east part of Sri Lanka. The war lasted 26 years and was one of the longest running civil war in Asia, cost over 150,000 lives, and displayed hundreds of thousands more. During the high time of the war in 1980s and 1990s, a significant wave of Sri Lankan, especially Tamils, migrated abroad, especially to country like Canada. Today, Canada is home for over 160,000 Sri Lankan Tamil. So women across Sri Lanka, whether in urban area or rural area, have long taken the role of household head. But in last 3 to 4 decades, there has been a notable increase due to the factors such as war, divorce, separation, migration, and economic shift. This project is kind of a personal and academic and political. It's about giving the voice to women whose stories are often ignored or simplified, and using the experience to push for better, more inclusive policy in Sri Lanka and beyond. Let's take a look closer at the lived realities of these women. These shorts represent different type of women-headed household across different districts. For example, if you take Klineci, the northern part, severely affected by war. She's a war widow with 4 children. She lost all family support during the war, and also she began a small business with the support of NGO. Though immense struggle, she raised 4 children. Now 2 are married and 2 are in the universities. She still lives away from the original home, which is located in the high security zone. All the war ended 15 years ago. Her story reflects a long-term resilience and success despite forced displacement and limited access to land and infrastructure. If you take the Colombo, which is the capital of Sri Lanka, this woman mutually divorced her husband and received emotional and practical support from her mother-in-law. She took up work as a cabin crew member, which helped her to gain financially independent. Her journey wasn't easy, juggling and a demanding job and parenting. Despite these challenges, she values the bond developed with her daughter and her ability to build a life on her own terms. If you take the particular eastern part of the Sri Lanka, which is also severely affected by war, her husband disappeared 16 years ago under uncertain circumstance. She still doesn't know what happened to him, and there is no death certificate as well. She never received institutional support because she doesn't have a death certificate and was left to raise 2 children alone. She started a small cooking business and farming to sustain the family. She also battling the legal case over land ownership. Her husband family dispute her rights to the property. She faces social stigma as a woman living alone with no formal closure on her husband's status. Her case highlights that the intersecting struggle of war legacy, legal insecurity, and gender stigma in post-war zones. If you take the south central Sri Lanka, she's also a war widow, but this woman is a widow of Sri Lankan army soldier and now receiving military pension, though it came only after long bureaucratic struggle. She is generally respected in the community due to her status as a military widow. However, in her younger years, she faced harassment from the visiting military officers, which added her emotional burden. These examples shows us that women-headed households are diverse and complex group with varied experience. Each story reflects how diverse and complex their path to headship are. Some are voluntarily, some are not, and how their geographic, social, and war-related conditions continue to shape up their life. So when we talk about women-headed household, it's important to understand they are not a single or uniform group. Today, about 1 in 4 households in Sri Lanka are headed by women-headed household. That is 25%. The number has steadily grown from 16% in 1975. So that is not the small group. It's a significant part of the country population. So while the civil war did cause a sharp increase in women-headed household in Sri Lanka, but war is not the only reason women became household head. So many women became women-headed household due to divorce, separation, migration, abandon, by choice, deciding not to marry or remarry. Yet, despite their different stories, many women-headed households are still seen only through the lens of vulnerability as people who need help or handouts. But my research shows a more complex picture. So let's talk about 3 key ideas that are central to my research, essential for rethinking how we understand women-headed household in Sri Lanka today. These are redefining headship, rethinking poverty, and recognizing post-war resilience. So redefining headship, the traditional notion of head of household in Sri Lanka are rooted in patriarchal and colonial framework that assume men are natural leaders economically, socially, and legally. However, these outdated model fails to reflect the current realities where millions of women are independently managing households, earning income, making key decisions, and raising children, often in the complete absence of male partner, highlighting the need, as the feminist scholars argue, to formally recognize women headships in law, policy, and public discourse. So women-headed households are not broken families, but fully functioning one led by the capable woman. Labeling women-headed household as the poorest of the poor oversimplifies a much more diverse reality. While some women face deep economic hardship and social isolation, others have access to remittance, land, or small business income. Poverty for women-headed household is not just about income. It includes barriers to land, education, healthcare, credit, and dignity. Factors shaped by intersecting inequality like caste, class, ethnicity, age, education, geography. So instead of assuming women-headed households are poor and passive, we must ask what kind of poverty they face and how they actively resist it. After the war ended in 2009, many women-headed households, especially in the north and east, became head of the household due to the death and disappearance, displacement of male partners. Far from merely surviving, many of these women became breadwinners, caregivers, community leaders, challenging deeply embedded gender norms. Despite the ongoing legal obstacle, social stigma, and the minimal state support, women-headed households have shown remarkable resilience by starting a business, fighting for land's right, creating an informal support network that sustain their family and community. So this talks about the shifting the narrative, this slide. So for viewing women-headed household as a single family breakdown, to recognize them as a resilient household leaders who sustain family, challenging gender norms, and rebuilding life in post-war Sri Lanka. So my research core question guiding this study helped me to uncover the both diversity of women-headed household and the structural factors shaping their lives in post-war Sri Lanka. I begin by asking what type of woman-headed household exists in the country today. Are they widowed, separated, never married, heading the household for other reasons? So then I explored how the experience differ based on the social, economic, and the political context. For instance, how living in a rural village or urban center or post-war district might impact their day-to-day life. A central focus on my inquiry was to how intersecting identity factors such as ethnicity, caste, class, geography, disability, and the marital status combine to shape their lived reality. I also sought to understand their coping strategy and survival mechanism these women rely on sustain their household, as well as the type of support whether they are receiving from the government or NGO or family or community that are available to them. Finally, I examine how which policies and programs have been effective in addressing their needs and where most significant gaps support still remain. These questions and the objective that I have mentioned help me to move beyond generalization and better understand the real lives and everyday experience of women-headed households in Sri Lanka. So, my research is grounded by 4 main theoretical frameworks. Each offers a different lens to understand the lived reality of women-headed household in post-war Sri Lanka. Together, they help me to move beyond the simplified narratives of victimhood. One of the theory I used, feminist political economy, as developed by scholars like Nancy Fraser, Danielle Elson, and Geeta Sen, Bifasha Barua, Sylvia Wilby, and Chan. Highlighting how structural inequalities such as unpaid care worker, limited access to resources, exclusion from decision making, and gender labor diversions shape the economic realities of women-headed household and call for rethinking the development of policy through the gendered lens. And also I'm using the feminist security studies advanced by scholars like Tigner, Enlo and Laura Subroch and Jacqueline True, expand the concept of security beyond national defense to include economic, emotional, and social well-being, highlighting how women-headed household continues to face insecurity and marginalization even after the war ended. And also Crenshaw intersectionality theory emphasizes how overlapping identities such as gender, caste, ethnicity, religion, geography, and ability and disability interact to shape the diverse challenges and opportunity faced by women-headed household, ensuring they are not treated as a single uniform group. My last theory was a livelihood vulnerability framework developed by the Robert Chambers and Gordon Conway and expanded through the gendered lens by Sarah Gamage, helped to analyze how women-headed households navigate everyday risk, insecurity, and resilience, highlighting the structural factors that shape their coping strategies and access to resource in post-war setting. This is my research methodology, how the research was designed to contact, to reflect and the complex, diverse, and deeply personal realities of women-headed household in Sri Lanka. I adopted a feminist, qualitative, and intersectional approach which allowed me to center women voices and lived experience, especially those often silenced and marginalized. Rather than aiming to generalize, the goal was to explore the depth of women lived realities. So the analysis was inductive. The meaning I did not begin with a preset of categories. So instead I allowed the key themes to emerge organically from what participants share. To gather data, I used 3 qualitative methods: focus group discussion, in-depth interview, and the key informant interview. 10 focus group discussion to capture the collective community perspective I conducted, and to gain deeper insight in the individual lived experience that may not have been surfaced in a group discussion. I conducted 30 in-depth interview work conducted with a woman-headed household. From the pool of focus group discussion participants, I chose 10 Sinhalese and 10 Tamil, 10 Muslim women-headed household was selected for one-on-one interviews. Those participants were chosen based on the willingness to discuss more sensitive topics and the ability to provide rich, reflective narratives. The in-depth interview provided an opportunity to examine the issue that may have been difficult to discuss in the focus group discussion, such as domestic violence, stigma related to victimhood or widowhood, and the emotional impact, displacement, and the economic hardship. I also conducted 12 key informant interviews with policymakers, activists, and NGO staff and the government staff to understand the institutional and policy level dimension. These methods allow me to triangulate the finding to build No's understanding of the challenges women-headed households they face. A total 120 women-headed household was selected for the focus group, 10 focus group discussion. Each focus group discussion had 12 participants, and they were selected through the demographic screening process to reflect the broad spectrum of the diversity. The research was carried out across the 9 districts in all 9 provinces in Sri Lanka, including both war-affected areas directly and those less impacted by the war. This geographic and identity based on the diversity was essential to understanding how place and positionality shape the woman experience. Ethical approval was obtained from the University of Western Ontario in Canada and University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. Throughout the process, I used culturally adapted trauma-informed tools to ensure that the participants felt safe, respected, and supported. I also ensured voluntary participant informed consent, confidentiality, and the right to withdraw from any time. Practicing critical reflexivity, I remain conscious of my own position, power, and privilege, particularly as a male researcher working with women in vulnerable setting. To minimize the hierarchy, I dressed up simply and sat at the same level as a participant and shared my own background of growing up in a woman-headed household during the war. That helped me to conduct the research. So let's move to my finding. I want to emphasize one of the most important findings in studies. Women-headed households are not single uniform group. They emerge from a diverse, dynamic life situation shaped by the personal, social, and political realities. In total, identify 9 main categories and 32 subcategories of women-headed households, showing just how variety these experiences are. For example, widowhood. Many women become women-headed household after losing their husband to the war or natural disaster like tsunami, illnesses, suicide, or workplaces accident. Some lost their husband in combat, both from the military and the LTT, while others lost their partners, civilian violence, and or diseases. Husband missing. Some husbands were forcefully disappeared, abducted, or went missing during the war. And husband imprisoned. These include political detainees or those imprisoned for the personal crime. Also separated women and the divorced woman. Many left abusive or neglectful relationship, or were separated due to the family or cultural pressure. Some receive child support, many do not. Divorce is rare due to the social stigma, so many remain legally married but they don't live together. And also there is another category, husband left. In several cases, husband abandoned the family, often remarrying or leaving during the displacement. Women are left to raise their children alone, frequently without legal or financial support. Married women, these women still live with their husband, but the partners are unable to or unwilling to contribute to the addiction or illness, disability, or migration. In practice, the woman manage everything, is the head of the household. Unmarried women, some never married due to the family responsibility, caste, religion restriction, or personal choice. Others are unmarried but raising children, facing strong social stigma and lack of recognition. And also some transgender women led household care for dependent and have been cut off from the family support. This group is often invisible in the policies discussion. These diversities need to be acknowledged in both research and policy making, because one size fits for all solution simply does not work. Next slide showing the common critical challenges faced by the women-headed household across Sri Lanka. These issues came up repeatedly, the few issues that I'm showing repeatedly in my interview focus group discussion, regardless of the ethnicity, region or age. Women-headed household consistently judged for being single, widowhood or divorced, even just for being seen in a public without a man. Leading gossip, exclusion from the community, and emotional stress and reduced access to support network. And as a solo caregiver and a breadwinner, many women-headed households carry the full emotional and financial burden, often while supporting elderly or disabled family members, and experience deep loneliness even within their own homes. And women-headed households frequently face bureaucratic obstacles when seeking the government aid or housing or loan, often being denied support for lacking document like a husband death certificate or male guarantor, or encountering bias from the service provider. And also the psychological impact. The accumulation of loss, poverty, stigma, and fear deeply affected women-headed household mental health, with many describing sleepless night, crying, and hopelessness. Yet mental health services remain inaccessible to their needs. And also women-headed households are more vulnerable to sexual harassment and threats, often targeted by military personnel, service provider, even the family members, particularly in male-dominant or militarized space. And women-headed households also face persistent economic challenges due to lack of education, land rights, capital, and childcare support. And even when they try to start small business, they are frequently excluded from the credit or ignored by the government and ONGO. These are just not isolated problems. They are structural issues shaped by the gender inequality, war legacy, and the policy failure. But also, despite many challenges we have just seen, women-headed household also set for strength, resistance, and transformation. This slide highlights the agency, coping strategies, and resilience these women demonstrate every day. Many women-headed households actively challenge the social pressure to remarry for security or acceptance instead of choosing freedom, independence, and self-respect over life under male control. As one woman in Colombo put it, I wanted to live my own terms, not under someone else's control. And also women-headed household often pursued small scale of business like cooking, farming, schooling to provide for their children without relying on the state support or male relatives, such as Baticulo participant who said that I started selling food from home, it covers school expenses. Though their role as a head of household, many women gain confidence, autonomy in making everyday decisions, like something they lacked during the marriage. With one woman in Kandy say, now I make my own choice for my children, I feel very strong. And in the absence of government support, women-headed households depend on the informal network of neighbors, friends, and communities or relative emotional support, referral, or childcare. As one of the women goals said, we support like each other, sister. Without that, I would be lost. And despite the trauma and instabilities, women-headed household drew strength from faith, spirituality, and inner resolve, such as like woman from Kilnechi said, there are days I wanted to give up, but I pray and keep going. I survived the war, so I can survive this too. These stories shows that women-headed households are not passive victims. They survive, adapt, and reshape their life, challenging the patriarchal structure and caring for family in post-war Sri Lanka. Another thing, one of the research finding in the study that experienced women-headed households are shaped by the multiple intersecting factors, not just gender. Their lives are influenced by their ethnicity, caste, class, marital status, geography, region, disability, and education, all which intersect in a way that compound their vulnerability, affect their access to resources, right, and recognition. Women-headed households are not only widows, they include women who are divorced, separated, abandoned, never married, or whose partners are missing or imprisoned. Each of these categories comes with its own social stigma and exclusion. For example, a woman from Ratnapur shared how policy and community discourse often fail to recognize this diversity. The government, the aid, only count widows. What about us who are separated or left? We face the same struggles, sometimes worse. And other part is ethnicity is another key factor. Tamil woman-headed households, particularly those husbands affiliated to the LTT, who are separatist group, often face ethnic profiling and systemic bias. A woman from the particular put it in plainly, because I'm Tamil, my husband was in the LTT. Even now, they look at me with suspicious. In contrast, a Sinhalese Sinhalese military widow may receive support from the state, but often with a very strict condition like losing their pension if they remarry. Another factor is the religious identity also play a key role in shaping the support and stigma. Hindus and Buddhist widows are often bound by the restrictive norms, while some Christian communities are more supportive. As the Hindu woman from Kilnechi explained, when I went to ask for help, one auntie in the temple said, "You are a widow, you shouldn't be roaming like this." But when I went to church, they helped me without asking anything. Another part is geographical deeply impact the lived realities. Women in rural area and estate sector face limited infrastructure, isolation, and few services, while urban women-headed households deal with high living cost and social judgment. In war-affected area region like Kilnechi, a woman continues to face militarization and exclusion long after the war. As one of the Kilnechi women said, women in Colombo, Kandy, other part of Sri Lanka, may struggle, but at least they have roads, jobs, and safety. Here, even after the war ended, we are still cut off from everything. And also disability, women-headed households with disability are often denied job opportunities and left out of formal support system. Still may persist with the resilient. Women from Goal, disabled women, because I have disability, they don't consider me for a job, but I swear and I still think to manage. Together, these insights shows that women-headed households are navigating far more than just absence of the male partner. Their everyday lives are shaped by the web of social expectation, systemic barrier, and historical injustice. A Tamil war widow in the north, a Muslim divorced woman in the east, or Sinhalese military widow in the south may all be the woman-headed household, but the experience are fundamentally different. That is why the intersectionalities matter. It helps us to move beyond the idea that women-headed households are one homogeneous group, instead of understand them as a diverse woman living in complex, layered reality. Without this lens, policies risk treating all women-headed households are the same, and in doing so, failing the most marginalized among them. This slide shows present the key informant interview finding with policymakers, NGO staff, and the government staff. These practitioners offered a valuable perspective on both the barriers of that women-headed household face and the possibilities for changes. Many women-headed households rely on daily wage labor, informal work, small-scale farming, and as one of the NGO worker in particular noted that they are consistently on the edge of survival, with high interest microfinance loan often trapping them in a cycle of debt instead of empowering them. And exclusion from land and legal rights. Women-headed household, especially a widow, displaced woman without a husband name on the paperwork, are routinely excluded from the land rights. One of the UN workers said, without the husband name, women are sidelined in the land titling programs. And also women who do not conform their traditional family norms are often denied services due to the missing document or war displacement. And as one of the activists said, they are punished by the system not fulfilling its rules. Also, they are showing some possibility for change. Despite the systemic barrier, many women-headed households are stepping into leadership role, challenging gender norms, and as one of the NGO workers said, some women use the headship to claim new independence. They become leaders in their community. And also, in the absence of formal support, women-headed households often form their own network of care survival, as one of the activists put it out. Where the state support is absent, women form their own group to survive. And also there is a growing space for women-headed household in policy discussion today, something that was rare a decade ago. But as one UN representative stated that this shift is important, but recognizing also isn't enough. It must lead to real and targeted action. So these insights from the practitioners show that the women-headed household face deeply structural and systemic barrier, but also point to a more space for change, especially through the collective organizing and policy reform. So what needs to change for women-headed household? Based on what I learned from the practitioner, activist, women-headed household themselves, it's clear that the major changes are needed, not just to improve their life, but also recognize them as a woman with a long-standing responsibilities and attachment to their families and communities and land, whose roles have often been overlooked in post-war development. Here are the 6 critical areas where policies and practice must evolve. Women-headed household must no longer be treated as a single group. Context-specific policies should reflect the difference in age, region, marital status, ethnicity, because UN officers said what works for war widow won't work for young single mother. And also many women-headed households are still trained in outdated skill without real employment opportunities, or prompting. One NGO worker stated they are trained to sew, but there is no one to buy what they make. So women need to meaningful vocational training, access to market and pathway for decent work. And also without the husband name, many women-headed households are excluded from the land ownership and compensation. As one of the UN representatives stated that if the husband name is missing, women are invisible in the legal land registry. Legal reform must recognize women independent rights to own their inheritance property. And expand the social safety nets. Although women-headed households may appear strong, they carry emotional and financial burden that go unaddressed in current systems. So one activity shares, she might be strong, but she is carrying years of pain. Social protection must go beyond ration, including mental health care, child care, and income stability. Microfinance often, of course, causes stress and deepen the debt rather than empowering the woman-headed household, leading a woman advocate to stress. Debt is just not empowerment. Access to ethical finances. So women-headed household need fair credit options, debt relief, and transparent lending practices. Grassroots organizing offers women-headed households strength and solidarity. So as one NGO worker observed that changes start from the below. So women-headed household need safe support space to learn, share, and lead, especially in the communities where they have been silenced. So these changes are not just about fixing the broken system, they are about rebuilding them with the woman-headed household at the center, using their voice. So to conclude, the research called for fundamental shift in how woman-headed household understood engage with the woman-headed household in post-war Sri Lanka, in other war-affected settings globally. While many women-headed households experience stigma, poverty, and exclusion, they also display remarkable strength, self-resilience, and perseverance. So from rebuilding lives after conflict to supporting families alone, these women are already doing the work, survival, and care, without being seen, heard, or supported properly. So women-headed households are not one group. They include widows, separated or divorced women, women with missing or imprisoned partners, and those who have never married. These experiences are shaped by ethnicity, class, caste, geography, religion, education, age, disability, and this diversity must reflect on the policies and programs. Current intervention often fail to address the lived realities of women-headed households. Many programs overlook structural barriers like land laws, ethnic discrimination, and bureaucratic exclusion that make survival even harder. A shift in the perspective is urgently needed. We need to move away from viewing women-headed household as a passive recipient for aid and start recognizing them as the central actors in rebuilding families, communities, and local economy. That means designing the intersectional, feminist, and context-specific policies, not just welfare, but empowerment and long-term support. Ultimately, this research offers a framework that is transferable to other post-war settings where women are leading to household under difficult circumstances. Thank you.